Well, good morning and welcome to another edition of Flipside Live, coming to you on the Saturday morning, a little after 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on this March the 22nd. Robbie Noel with you with this short podcast. As I have mentioned many times before, because of my location in Rosarito Beach, Mexico, and because internet connection tends to be a hit or miss affair, one sometimes has to take advantage of the few windows you get during the day where you can be pretty confident that the connection will maintain for a fairly decent amount of time. Now, sometimes this workaround theory works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. So that is what usually dictates the length of any particular podcast I do. Well, no question, this was an interesting week. And I think by and large I've pretty much captured all the relevant parts that you should be paying attention to, posted on my webpage. Not only do we have some interesting commentaries from the usual suspects, such as Rick Rule, James Dines, however, I want to draw your attention to what I have posted on my webpage today. There are two videos that I feel not only accurately explain current situation, whether it is local or geopolitical, but also give a very good explanation of where we are headed, financially speaking. The first interview done by the good folks over at the Gold and Silver Page, otherwise known as Silver Doctors. As I've said many times before, I have no problem in linking to specific articles produced by, shall we say, other competitors in the gold and silver business, if I feel that the information is noteworthy. And so the doc spent some time with Quiz Jansen, who runs another website entitled Only in Gold We Trust, and he has done some amazing analytical work on not only gold demand, but where the gold is going, and in my opinion has a pretty good stable of sources that provide him with accurate information. Another video I feel is worthy of your time is also posted on today's edition.
You're listening to Sound Money from Casey Research. Hello and welcome to the show with me, Andy Duncan, in London. Today, coming to us from Massachusetts, my guest is Chris Martenson, the co-founder of peakprosperity.com and the author of The Crash Course, a seminal work on energy, the economy and the environment. On today's show, we'll be talking about the coming economic storm, peak oil energy and environmental sustainability. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Andy. It's good to be with you.
And it's great to talk to you again after meeting you in Arizona. Now, you've got an interesting background because you were a successful Fortune 300 executive living on a waterfront and having all mod cons. What made you wake up one day and decide to do something like the Crash Course to help other people?
I wish I could tell you there was a bright light and all of a sudden I was anointed with a mission. It developed actually enlightened self-interest. My portfolio was getting shredded. And I was living the American dream, right? Everything I was supposed to do, went to the right schools, all of that, got a good job, waterfront house, nice boat, all of that. And as my portfolio and savings got shredded, I looked into it. And the more I looked into the economy, the more worried I became because I saw things in there that were frankly nonsensical and unsustainable. And when I learned how money is created, that's kind of when the covers got ripped off and I started connecting dots, and one thing led to another, and soon enough I had a story that I just had to share with as many people as I could.
Now, you're trained as a scientist rather than an economist. Do you think that this has helped you being a scientist, or is it something you've had to work around?
No, it's absolutely helped, because I don't have the dogma. I think if I'd gone through the normal indoctrination at school, I would believe everything that the economists currently believe, which, by the way, I think is a complete fantasy. So it was rather helpful to come in from the outside and learn my way through it. And really, there's so much of this that really just makes common sense. And so much of economics is just absolutely nonsensical to me as a human being, like their primary assumption right at the base of everything, which is that humans are rational and make rational decisions. Right? That's the foundation for a lot of thinking in economics, and it's just observably and patently untrue in my daily life. So I think it was helpful.
Okay, now in the Crash Course, talking about money, you predict a coming economic storm. What does this storm look like to you, and when's it getting here, or are we already in it?
Well, I think we're in the early stages of it right now, and what we're seeing is the early edges of that from... Here's the way I think about the world: financial markets, societies, doesn't matter. They all operate the same. The weaker elements are always the places where you're going to see the first signs of distress. So in a society, you're going to see the ranks of the poor swell, and you're going to see the marginally employed become completely unemployed. You're going to see food stamp usage, people on the dole. All of those things begin to rise. Within a culture, when we look across nations, what do we see? Well, we see weaker states, places like Argentina and Venezuela and the Ukraine for, I think, the same sets of reasons, but also what we saw in the Arab Spring, Egypt, other places, Libya. These are all examples of where finally there wasn't quite enough to go around for the populations, and so it became social unrest. To me, that social unrest is merely a sign. It's a hallmark of what happens when you have an energy-dependent economy, when we've grown our population to absolute bursting limits, and we've all become accustomed to having lots and lots and lots of very cheap energy. And guess what? Oil's not cheap anymore, and it'll never be cheap again unless the world economy completely collapses. Either way, I don't see a way around this box. And we're not talking about this yet, at least maybe they're talking about it behind closed doors, behind the Parliament, in the Congress, other places, but we're not really talking about it in public yet, at least not in the United States, that this story has shifted.
And what would you do to fix the current global monetary system?
Well, the simple, if somebody said, Chris, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, that's all you get, here, articulate your case. I'll just show them one graph, first of all. I'll show them a graph of credit market debt. I'm familiar with the numbers from the United States, but they're roughly the same across the whole Western world. And what happened was, starting about 1980, we started borrowing at around twice the rate that our GDP was going up. So we're borrowing at about 8% per annum. When you compound that, Andy, it means every 9 years your credit market debt is going to double. Every 9 years you need twice as much debt, right? The problem is every 9 years you don't have twice as many houses, twice as many people, twice as many factories, twice as many cars. And so what is that debt going against? And so it became a system where we found new and clever ways to stuff all that credit into various nooks and crannies, but we didn't need it. And we got addicted to it. And our institutions, particularly financial institutions, said, we have to have this sort of growth or things become unstable. And the problem lies right at the core of the money system itself. And it's that we lend our money into existence. And when you lend something, it has a principal and an interest component. That statement right there, very simple, very powerful. It means we have a compound money system. It means it's continuously, exponentially expanding. And those sorts of systems always get into trouble. Always have, always will. And so if you were asking me, how would I fix our money system? We need a money system that doesn't expand exponentially almost by law. It's a rule baked into it. And we have to have a money system that actually is tied to the actual production that we can sustain on this planet.
Now, if you look at something like gold, that can be used to base the money system on because its price is determined by the market. So if it becomes more expensive to drill it out the ground or whatever, then its price will go up. And if it becomes cheaper, then people will drill more of it out the ground. So that could be used as a monetary system. What would you say to something like the Bitcoin system where there can only be 21 million Bitcoins? Should we base the money system on that?
Well, there can only be 21 million Bitcoins until somebody goes into the core code and agrees to change it, right? And so the way that that's actually coded at this point in time, if somebody got their hands on 51% of the coins, they would have the right to change the system however they wanted to, as I understand it. So it's a cryptocurrency. Listen, it means that it's always going to be subject to hacking, to fiddling around. We've seen, I think, just the tip of the iceberg of what the NSA has been capable of doing and what they have done. I'm a little suspicious of the idea that it's being sold to me as a cryptocurrency when I believe it's probably the most traceable currency, ultimately, because it all has to be conducted electronically, no ifs, ands, or buts, no hiding. And second of all, it is thoroughly... It's not fixed. It's only fixed because somebody coded 21 million into the core of that thing, but that can be shifted if somebody wants to again. So I like money for the old textbook reasons, right? It's got to be a unit of account. It has to be a medium of exchange, has to be a store of value. It's that one right there, Andy, that one of the reasons I happen to be a fan of gold. If somebody had a better element, I'm willing to listen. If somebody said we want to base this on tellurium now, I'd listen to the arguments. But I like gold simply because it's absolutely not subject to human fiddling. When all is said and done, you've either earned it and saved it or you haven't. It's that simple. It's one of the reasons many people in power today hate gold, but it's one of the reasons I love it.
Yes, it can only come out of supernovae, can't it? So given that this credit bubble is going to collapse at some point, this debt bubble, how can people best protect themselves from this coming storm, this coming credit bubble collapse?
Yeah, it's going to be sold to us as though it was this unavoidable, awful thing that happened, and it's going to be told, we're going to be sold this idea that it was massive wealth destruction, like when the stock market, from 2008 to 2010 lost 50% of its value, like, oh gosh, it just evaporated, right? The truth of the matter is, the better way to talk about this is the coming wealth transfer. And by that I mean, I differentiate wealth into three buckets. We have to understand them. Primary wealth is the first bucket. That's the stuff that's the earth, right? Like if you're in Phoenix or Tucson, where we were, right? Primary wealth is like an aquifer that you can draw upon. It's water in that environment. It might be soil in a farming community. It could be fish in fishing grounds if you're in the North Atlantic, right? So primary wealth is the wealth of the earth. Secondary wealth is what happens when people take primary wealth and produce it into something that gets to market, right? So that's our productive layer. So raw iron somehow gets turned into a car, right? That's the secondary wealth stage of this. And let's be clear, you can't have secondary wealth if you don't have primary wealth, right? If there's no fish, in the sea, there's no fish going to market. So primary is necessary for secondary. Tertiary wealth is the stuff that everybody's in love with right now. It's paper-based wealth, right? It's currencies, paper money, derivatives, stocks, bonds, but each one of these things itself has no use and no value to us unless it gives us a claim on some secondary wealth, right? What's 10 million euros or pounds in the bank to you if you can't buy something with it, like an apartment or a car? It's nothing. So this is all I want to stretch out, is that primary wealth precedes secondary wealth precedes tertiary wealth. If we don't have primary and secondary wealth, tertiary wealth has no meaning. Now, here's where the story gets fascinating, because when we look across the landscape, we see that our ability to generate new amounts of secondary wealth is slowing down big time. Global GDP is sort of hitting that stall speed, but our claims against it, our tertiary wealth, are just continuing on as if nothing had ever happened. Sovereign debts are just piling up. Entitlements continue to be underfunded, and pensions and all of that. Equity markets are going up. Bonds are more expensive than they've ever been. Japan's doubling its monetary base. That all sounds exciting until you take two steps back and look at what's happening. And what's happening, Andy, is we're getting larger and larger and larger claims against roughly the same amount of stuff. Hey, we've had this story many times in history. What happens is they call it a currency collapse, it's a credit burst, it's some name. But what happens is those tertiary claims, there's too many of them, and they have to get brought back into balance with the actual real wealth out there. So what do people do about this? It's very easy. You just make sure that you don't have 100% of your wealth over there in tertiary wealth land. You make sure that you have some of it over here in secondary or even primary sources of wealth. It is the only historical way I know to avoid what is always called wealth destruction, but is always actually wealth transfer.
No, so this would mean then gold, land, fine art, and other such things. But one of the things I like about you is that you don't take a typical hard money angle of just assets like that. You take more of a holistic view as well. What other kind of non-financial things can people do to ensure a good future for themselves and their families?
Oh, well, there's a lot that individuals can and should do. I believe that what we're all going to need to weather this coming storm is personal resilience. And I think resilience begins at home. It actually begins with you. Whoever's listening to this, you're going to be, your family is going to be, your community is going to be as resilient as you are and no more, right? So personal resilience means first, my basic advice is get out of debt, particularly high-yielding debt, right? Debt's just a stone-cold killer in a credit collapse because you have to pay it back, and it's very difficult to do that. So if you have high interest-bearing debt, in particular credit card debt, student loans, auto loans, things like that, consumptive debt, get rid of it. Credit card debt, obviously, get rid of it. If you've done all of that, now you can invest, in yourself, in your house, in your homestead. And here I need to redefine the word investment. We've been marketed to so successfully for so long that investment means you work hard, you save a little money off, and then you send it off, right, to Wall Street or its equivalent. And, close your eyes, cross your fingers, hope for the best. That's called lazy money approach, right? I'm just going to earn some and send it off and hope for the best, right? I want people to take a more active view of investing, and businesses invest, in many cases, in capital improvements so that they can reduce the cost of production. The homeowner equivalent would be to invest in things that will reduce your future cash flows out the door. There are fantastic investments you can make in home energy production and efficiency measures, in growing some of your own food, other things that have incredibly high rates of return and give you a higher quality of life and are going to help you control your future cash flows. So lots of investments like that. We have lots of ideas, things that have double and even triple digit returns, and it all looks great. If you've done all that, got money left over, gold is absolutely a must at this point in time. I invest in silver as well, but because I'm in love with it as an industrial metal, less so a monetary metal. I invest in gold because I love it as a monetary metal, less so as an industrial metal. Two metals, but I absolutely think everybody needs exposure to those. And then, hey, still got money left over, and some of it's got to stay over out there in tertiaryville for some reason. You've got a pension, you've got stocks that are, really high capital gains on them, other reasons that you need to get locked over there. Well, have that managed and managed really well with an eye towards what the risks really are. And by the way, there are a lot of investments out there that can be made with your tertiary wealth that actually get you closer over into what I would call secondary and sometimes even primary wealth. Really nice things cropping up these days.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, sure. One of my favorites is a company called Farmland LP. It's a limited partnership. And what they did in their first round is they went out and bought 1,100 acres right outside of San Francisco, about an hour and a half out. Classically farmed area, so it needs improvement to be brought back up to full health. So what they're doing is, what they've done is they've put a 3-year animal rotation on there to get it back to soil health and fertility, improving the soil dramatically, and very, very complex rotation schedule they do this, and back to organic status. And then once it's got the organic status, then they put vegetable rotation on it and walk the vegetables across these 1,100 acres. And they're actually generating a very, very nice rental income because they bought the property and then they lease it out to farmers who are in a position to lease. And so what's happening here is people who invest in this, they have a capital position in a piece of land that's appreciating. They have rental income flow off of it. The land is being improved, and the food security of that region is actually enhanced by having this sort of an activity go on, and lots of jobs are created for people who want to farm in a more sustainable, if not fully sustainable, and more holistic way that's good for the earth. So to me, that's an example of a win-win-win kind of a investment that can be made. And by the way, people could park some of their tertiary funds. There happen to be in, pick something, some stock or bond fund, and could put it in this instead. And that's just a great example, I think.
Now that ties in nicely to your model, your 3 E's model of the economy and the environment. The third leg of that is energy. Now you're a great believer in the kind of peak oil ideas. Where do you think the world's going to get its energy from in the future if we can't rely on oil and oil fracking and other oil-related kind of derivatives?
That's a really good question because nobody's been able to answer that. Not a day goes by we don't hear about some scientist who's made a beaker of oil on the bench out of something. But the truth of the matter is there are literally 0 things on the drawing board right now that could replace oil at scale. I mean, it's one thing to make a beaker of oil. It's quite another to have 100,000 barrels per day output from a major refinery. The gap there is just so large that we're not even close to bridging it with any alternative fuels yet. So we still need petroleum. We need it because that's how we move things from point A to point B almost entirely. And this is the part of the story that's really, I think, been badly managed, if not mangled, by the mainstream press buying into what is turning out to be, in my mind, a lot of hype around the shale story, but also just some very, very poor context has been provided. Now, let's wander over to the rest of the world for a second and notice that all 10 oil majors this year, all 10 of them, right? Your Shells, your Chevrons, your Exxons, all of them, Total, Eni, all of them are either freezing their capital expenditures or they're reducing their capital expenditures this coming year. Why? Because they've said they can't prosecute any of the things that they see out there at $110 a barrel and make money or cash flow it in an appropriate way. So that's a huge admission, right? All 10 oil majors have said, we can't, we're tossing in the towel on this whole thing. People really ought to be paying attention to that. It says something. And so when we wander back over to the shale story in the United States, yes, there's more production coming out, but it's really bizarre, right? For the past 4 years, they've been spending, on average, $1.50 in CapEx to produce $1 in revenue. All of them are cash flow negative. If you stripped away the identifying features of these companies and just showed me their cash flow statements, I would tell you these are just ridiculously horrible enterprises. But somehow, we're still in love with them. And I think the answer, only way I can close the financial data with the reality right now is I don't think they're making money all in. I think their all-in costs are actually higher than these wells are yielding. But you know what? Wall Street keeps funding them. They keep getting all of this investment. They keep getting billions in CapEx, through financing, and they're just dumping it into these holes. But where's my cash flow? It's not there. So my point in all this is that oil needs to get more expensive. The oil majors will not begin to increase their CapEx and prosecute other projects on the globe until oil's at a higher price that can justify those projects. So pick it, right? Oil's going to go from 110 on the world stage. I think it has to be at least 120 or 30 for the oil majors to get interested again. I think it has, and after that, it'll have to go to 140, 150, and then it'll be 200 and so on. That's where we are in the story. And oh, by the way, our debt markets hate expensive oil. The whole model from 1980 to 2008 of growing our debts at 8% per year compounded was predicated on $20 a barrel oil. It doesn't work on $100 barrel oil.
So is this why you like silver then? Because we could be using a lot more solar power in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're going to have to use a lot more solar power. The data's coming in pretty hard and fast that we are doing things to the atmosphere that are not good. And the piece that's really, really clear to me is around the acidification of the oceans, right? Carbon dioxide goes in the atmosphere, goes into equilibrium with the ocean, and creates an acid in the ocean. And we're raising the pH of the ocean at a rate faster than it's ever risen in the last 300 million years. And at some point, us humans might go, maybe we shouldn't do that, because if the ocean system suddenly changes, if we don't have this awesome stuff called phytoplankton because the pH is too high, then I think we might suddenly say we're going to have to figure out how to use a lot more solar energy. So when we look at solar energy, it requires, solar panels require quite a bit of rare stuff to make them. And the most common ones still require about 0.1 grams of silver per watt. And I calculated it out, Andy, and I wanted to answer this question. I said, how much silver would we need at that rate, 0.1 grams per watt, in order to satisfy 1/5 of the current electricity consumption of the world? Just 1/5, right? And the answer is we need 200 billion ounces of silver. So what are there? Maybe 4 or 5 billion on the surface of the planet, maybe about that many left in the crust that we can get to easily. There's nowhere near enough silver to complete that task. So I'm convinced that we're going to use silver and we're going to do everything we possibly can. But at the same time, we really have to just bust some napkins and crayons out and say, is there even enough stuff in the planet to make these solar panels? They make these, there's other technologies. You can make them out of gallium arsenide. Gallium, even rarer than silver by 2 orders of magnitude. Oh, but there's cadmium, tellurium. Well, tellurium, really rare again. So I keep running into all these things around these new technologies, and I'm just asking the very basic question, what's the rarest thing that's required for that technology to operate? And when I calculate them, I find there's really nothing we can do at current technologies to replace the amount of energy we are getting out of natural gas, coal, and oil.
I've just got one last final question for you, Chris. It sounds quite gloomy what you've been describing so far. Do you think we can actually achieve a path and walk along that path that gets us towards a sustainable future?
Well, here's the frustrating thing, and it's why it is a gloomy story. It's gloomy only because we're being idiots. It's not gloomy if we decide to get smart about this. So here's what I mean. I put solar thermal panels on my house, Andy, and it cut my oil use, because I have an oil furnace and it heats the water and heats the house. It cut my oil use by around 2/3. And I'm going to make money at it. It's a great investment. It's this awesome thing. It's robust technology. There's no reason at all that every single building shouldn't have these on them, and we don't have them. And it's not because it makes sense on every dimension you could think of. Environmentally, national security, local jobs, social justice, whatever you care about, saving money, these things make sense, but we don't do them. So the non-gloomy side of the story is I think we're going to wake up at some point. We're going to discover we have to do things differently. And guess what? The industries that are out there that are going to be offering far more efficient technologies in refrigerators, freezers, air conditioning, they all exist. We just don't use them that much yet, right? Those companies that are offering those things, I think, are going to be very, very well positioned. The companies that have access to or are directly involved in procuring the raw minerals that we're going to need, that we will use someday to make this transition away from these fossil fuels towards different alternative technologies, they'll do well. Are we going to continue as is without any changes at all in our current operating paradigm? The answer to me is no. So that's gloomy. If you want everything to continue as is, I got a bad story for you. But if you say, oh, well, things will be different, how will they be different? Can they still be awesome and different? The answer is yes. And there will be winners and losers. The winners are going to be those who see this coming and who start to move towards, skating to where the puck is going to be, the hockey saying, right? I see where the puck is going, and we're going to have to be far more efficient. We're going to have to use a lot less energy in the near future. If we, maybe because we think it's important for environmental reasons, or maybe simply because the energy isn't there. Either one of those reasons gets the puck to the same spot. So I do see companies that are positioning themselves, and I think individuals can too. That's the message.
And where can people find out about your ideas about where the hockey puck's going to end up?
Well, the website is peakprosperity.com, and a lot of information there. We have a very active community, and the main offering is something called the Crash Course. It comes in book form, very easy to find on Amazon, still doing pretty well in sales, and it's also available in video form. And here's a teaser. It was last completed, the video, in 2008, and we are just updating the whole thing to be fresh as of January 2014. So a bunch of new content coming out as well.
That's fantastic. Well, it's been great speaking to you today, Chris, and I'd like to thank you for handing me that gold cash note in Tucson when we were there together. Thank you very much for your time today, Chris Martinson.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Andy.
You can subscribe to Sound Money on iTunes or sign up to our subscription service at soundmoneyshow.com, where you can also listen to our growing catalogue of podcasts, which include interviews with some of the most famous.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that interview courtesy of KC Research. You can find a link if you want to pass it on to someone on the web page, together with the audio from Silver Doctor and many other pertinent interviews. Just access my website at robbynoel.com. Well, looky here. We made it almost 34 minutes today. So unless some earth-shattering news breaks sometime today or tomorrow, this concludes this Saturday edition of the Week in Review, and I appreciate your support and hope that you find these podcasts informative and of interest. Till the next time.